The celebratory dinner that followed my college graduation should have been the proudest moment of my life. For years, I had pushed myself to the absolute limit, balancing relentless studies with multiple jobs, all to reach this pinnacle. Yet, as the clinking of silverware echoed in the upscale Italian restaurant, my father, Robert, looked me dead in the eye and delivered an ultimatum that cut me to my core. He laughed, a sound devoid of genuine warmth, and said, "You're old enough now. Time to face the music. Either pay rent or move out." He had no idea, then, that I'd been meticulously planning my escape for months, every secret detail carefully laid out. The look on their faces the very next day, when I revealed my new place and declared, unequivocally, that I would no longer be covering their bills, would be worth every single penny I'd saved, every ounce of sacrifice I'd endured. Their shock, their sudden pallor, was the silent vindication I hadn't known I so desperately needed. From the outside, we truly did appear to be the quintessential middle-class American family. We resided in a comfortable 4-bedroom house nestled in a quiet Pennsylvania suburb. My father held a respectable position as a senior systems analyst, while my mother, Diana, worked part-time at the local library. My younger brother, Jake, and I seemingly wanted for nothing. Our lives were punctuated by annual beach vacations, boisterous birthday parties, and piles of presents under the Christmas tree. Everything on the surface seemed utterly picture-perfect. But when I turned 15, the carefully constructed facade began to crack. Dad arrived home one day, his face strained, etched with an unfamiliar grimness. He'd been laid off. After 15 years of loyal service, his career, his stability had vanished in an instant. Mom, ever resilient, immediately picked up more hours, but her modest library salary barely stretched to cover groceries, let alone the daunting mortgage payments that loomed over us. Dad, clinging to a fading hope, kept reassuring us, "It's just temporary. I'll find something better." Yet that something better never materialized. Weeks bled into months, then into a full year, and the only jobs he could secure paid significantly less than his previous salary. His pride, once a towering fortress, took a devastating hit. I'd often hear him late at night, the cold blue glow of the computer screen illuminating his frustrated face as he endlessly scrolled through job listings, a silent testament to his despair. The house, once filled with light-hearted chatter and laughter, slowly transformed into a space permeated by whispered arguments and a palpable tension that descended upon us after Jake and I had gone to bed. By the age of 16, a silent, unshakable conviction settled within me. I had to help. I secured a job at the local grocery store, diligently bagging groceries after school and on weekends, every spare moment dedicated to earning. My first paycheck, just over $100, felt like a fortune. I remember the immense pride as I handed it to my mother. "Oh, honey, you should keep this," she protested. But I saw the undeniable relief flood her eyes, momentarily softening the lines of worry around them. "I want to help, Mom," I insisted, my young heart bursting with a fierce protectiveness. "We're family." What began as a heartfelt gesture, however, quickly solidified into an unspoken expectation. When the electricity bill arrived, emblazoned with a stark past-due notice, Dad looked pointedly at me. "Sophia," he'd say, his voice carefully casual, "can you chip in this month? Just until I get back on my feet." At first, I didn't mind. I picked up more shifts, even adding a weekend job waiting tables at a bustling diner. My grades, predictably, dipped slightly, but I still managed to maintain a solid B average, a testament to my unwavering determination, all while working nearly 30 hours a week during high school. By my senior year, I was independently paying for my own clothes, school supplies, and extracurricular activities, still diligently contributing around $300 a month to the household. Dad had eventually found a job, but it paid only half his old salary, and somehow, inexplicably, our family finances never seemed to improve. What I didn't know then, what my innocent heart couldn't fathom, was that Dad had developed a hidden gambling habit. He'd make discreet stops at the casino on his way home, utterly convinced he could win back everything we'd lost, chasing an elusive phantom of past prosperity. Mom, later, would reveal she knew that the truth was a heavy stone in her stomach, but she felt utterly powerless to stop him. He'd promise it was the last time, a solemn vow whispered in the quiet of their bedroom, only to be back at the slot machines days later, drawn by an irresistible compulsion. Jake, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. 3 years my junior, he was completely sheltered, insulated from the harsh realities that governed our household. While I worked double shifts, sacrificing my youth, he played video games with friends, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. He'd ask for the latest gaming console for Christmas, and somehow, miraculously, the money would appear. When I needed new shoes for work, a necessity, I bought them myself. "Your brother is still young," Mom would gently admonish when I dared to point out the glaring disparity. "Let him enjoy his childhood." So I did. I worked. I studied. I kept us afloat, a silent anchor in a turbulent sea. I watched my father become increasingly dependent on my income, not as a temporary fix, but as a permanent, comfortable solution to his own burgeoning failures. My mother, in her quiet desperation, accepted it without question, and they both, subtly but undeniably, began to treat me differently, expecting adult responsibilities from me while simultaneously allowing Jake the carefree freedoms of a teenager. When college acceptance letters finally rolled in, a beacon of hope after years of relentless effort, I had my pick of schools. But the full scholarship to our local state university made the decision simple, almost painfully so. I couldn't bear to leave my family financially, even though a deep, aching part of me desperately yearned to escape, to breathe free. "You always were the responsible one," Dad remarked when I announced my decision, a statement that now, in retrospect, carried a chilling subtext. What he really meant, what I now understood with a bitter clarity, was, "You're the one we can always count on for money." I moved into a dorm, immersing myself in campus life, but every weekend I returned home, religiously working my jobs, sending money regularly for bills, calling daily to check in, a tether binding me to their needs. I watched my friends embrace the full college experience, the spontaneous parties, the exhilarating spring break trips, while I consistently declined invitations, choosing instead to pick up extra shifts or send money home for the looming property tax bill. Throughout it all, I clung to a fragile hope, repeating to myself that it was temporary. Once I graduated and found a good job, things would get better. Once Dad got back on his feet, I could finally focus on my own life. Once our family finances stabilized, I could begin saving for my own future. But deep down, an uncomfortable, insidious truth began to settle in. Nothing was going to change unless I changed it. College, I had believed, was supposed to be my ticket to freedom, a vibrant gateway to a life of my own making. Instead, it became just another obligation to balance, a heavy weight on my already burdened shoulders. My typical Monday would commence at an unforgiving 5 a.m. I'd shower quickly, review notes for my 8 a.m. business ethics class, grabbing a protein bar on the go. After class, I'd rush to my part-time campus job at the admissions office, working diligently from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., then a blur of afternoon classes until 5, a quick, often solitary dinner, followed by arduous studying until midnight. Tuesdays and Thursdays mirrored this relentless, hectic pace, a never-ending cycle of exhaustion. Weekends offered no reprieve. They were simply another set of obligations. I'd drive home Friday evening, heading straight to the diner for the dinner shift. Saturdays meant a grueling double at the grocery store. Sundays were a split shift between diner brunch and laundry, before I'd finally head back to campus, my body aching, my mind weary. My roommate, Elaine, a bright and compassionate soul, would often just be starting her weekend, bubbling with plans when I was already ending mine, dragging myself into our dorm room, utterly spent. "You know this isn't normal, right?" Elaine had said one Sunday evening, watching me stumble in, exhaustion radiating from me. Most college students aren't paying their parents' bills. I just shrugged, the weight of their needs feeling too heavy to explain. They need the help, I murmured, a reflex response born of years of conditioning. But do they really? She pressed, her gaze sharp, unwavering. Your dad has a job. Your mom works. Your brother's old enough to work part-time, too. Why is it all on you? Her questions, so simple yet so profound, made me incredibly uncomfortable because I had no good answers. The truth was, I'd never truly questioned it. It had evolved so gradually, so insidiously, from an initial gesture of helping during a genuine crisis to becoming the family's permanent financial safety net. Before I knew it, I was habitually paying the electric bill, the internet bill, and more often than not, the grocery bill too. The internet is getting shut off, Mom would text, a passive plea. Can you send $200 for the bill? Or, Dad's car needs repairs. Can you help with the $500 mechanic bill? Then the big ones. We're a little short on the mortgage this month. Can you contribute $800? Each request arrived with the unspoken, yet profoundly clear, expectation that I would comply, and I always did. I'd scrape together my meager earnings, often eating ramen for a week, and dutifully send the money home. The brief rush of gratitude would quickly fade, inevitably replaced by the next urgent, undeniable need. During my sophomore year, the requests escalated even further, their demands becoming a voracious maw. I was regularly sending nearly 70% of my earnings home, leaving my own expenses at the absolute bare minimum. Used textbooks, clothes I'd worn for years, never eating out unless it was a free meal from my diner shift. That's when Elaine, bless her heart, staged her intervention. This has to stop, she said firmly, sitting me down one evening, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and exasperation. You are killing yourself while your family takes advantage of you. They're not taking advantage. I protested weakly, the ingrained loyalty warring with a burgeoning resentment. They need help. Then why isn't your brother helping? She shot back, her voice rising slightly. Why did your dad just buy a new television? Why did your mom post about their weekend getaway on social media? I had no answers. The new TV had appeared the very same week I'd sent money for what Dad had called essential bills. The getaway, a seemingly frivolous expense, had happened immediately after I'd contributed to a desperate situation with the water heater. You need to start saving for yourself, Elaine insisted, her voice softening, yet firm. Open a separate account they don't know about. Put something away each month, even if it's just $20. Something that's just for your future. That night, something within me clicked. I did it. I opened a new savings account at a different bank, a quiet act of rebellion. I set up a direct deposit for 20% of my earnings to go straight into that account, a protective barrier against my own conditioning, before I could be tempted to send it home. It wasn't much at first, maybe $50 a week, but it was something. It was mine. As my junior year began, a turning point emerged. I connected with a financial advisor, Harriet, through a campus workshop. Harriet, a woman of seasoned wisdom, reviewed my financial situation with a quiet yet profound concern. You've taken on an adult burden while you're still establishing yourself, she noted, her voice gentle but firm. This pattern will continue as long as you allow it. With Harriet's patient guidance, I began to educate myself, delving into the intricacies of budgeting, investing, and, most importantly, setting healthy financial boundaries. We meticulously crafted a plan to gradually reduce my family contributions while simultaneously building my own crucial safety net. Your first loyalty has to be to yourself, Sophia, Harriet reminded me, her words a much-needed anchor. You cannot help others if you are drowning. By my senior year, my separate savings account had grown to a respectable sum, a testament to my discipline and Harriet's unwavering belief in me. I'd secured a high-paying internship, with a marketing firm that valued my burgeoning work ethic, and they'd already offered me a full-time position upon graduation, a golden ticket to a future I had only dared to dream of. For the very first time, I could truly see a future that was not defined by my family's relentless needs, a future where I was the architect of my own destiny. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. With Harriet's expert help, I started discreetly looking at starter homes in a modest but growing neighborhood, conveniently located about 20 minutes from campus. Prices were surprisingly reasonable, and with my accumulated savings and excellent credit score I had diligently maintained, and the secure new job offer, I qualified for a mortgage. I found a small, charming 2-bedroom house with a modest yard and a welcoming front porch. It needed some cosmetic work, a fresh coat of paint here, a bit of landscaping there, but it was structurally sound, its bones good. The price was well within my budget, especially when I considered the exorbitant amounts I'd been contributing to my parents' household all those years. 3 months before graduation, I closed on the house in absolute secrecy. Only Elaine and Harriet knew, sworn to silence. I arranged for the closing to happen during spring break, telling my family I was working extra shifts, a familiar and unquestioned excuse. I signed the papers with trembling hands, simultaneously terrified by the enormity of the commitment and exhilarated by my newfound boldness. "This is the first day of your independent life, Sophia," Harriet had said, her voice warm, as she witnessed my signature, a moment forever etched in my memory. I kept the house empty for those 3 months, a silent sanctuary, occasionally visiting to simply sit on the floor of what would soon be my living room, planning where furniture would go, how I'd decorate, slowly imbuing the space with my own dreams. But mostly I prepared myself, mentally and emotionally, for the inevitable confrontation that would erupt when my family learned I was cutting financial ties. Graduation approached, and with it, a reckoning I both dreaded and desperately needed. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turbulent emotions churning within me. I put on my cap and gown in the dorm room I'd shared with Elaine for 4 years, my heart a tangled mess of pride, anxiety, and a fierce anticipation for what lay ahead. "Today is about celebrating you," Elaine reminded me, her touch gentle as she helped adjust my cap. "Try to enjoy it, no matter what happens later." The ceremony was held on the university's sprawling main lawn, a sea of black gowns and beaming faces. As I took my place among my fellow graduates, my gaze swept through the crowd, searching for my family. Mom waved enthusiastically, her smile wide. Dad, ever distracted, checked his phone, his attention elsewhere. Jake, predictably, looked bored, already counting the minutes until it was over. When my name was called, Sophia Wilson, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude, the dean's voice rang out clear and strong. I walked across the stage, my head held high, accepting my diploma with a firm handshake. Turning to smile at the audience, in that singular moment, looking at the sea of faces, I felt a surge of accomplishment that no one, not even my family, could diminish. This achievement, this hard-won triumph, was mine alone. After the ceremony, my parents found me in the throng of happy graduates. Mom hugged me tightly, her embrace warm and genuine. Dad clapped me on the shoulder, a rare, almost awkward gesture of affection. "We're so proud," Mom said, her eyes genuinely warm, misty with emotion. "For years gone just like that," Dad added, a strange note in his voice. "Time to join the real world now." Jake gave me a perfunctory hug, already restless. "Can we go eat? I'm starving." My parents had made reservations at a mid-range Italian restaurant near campus. Not the fanciest, but a definite step up from our usual, budget-conscious choices. As we were seated, Dad made a show of telling the waiter, "We're celebrating our daughter's graduation today." The waiter, with a pleasant smile, replied, "Congratulations! First round of drinks is on me." Dad, seizing the opportunity, immediately ordered an expensive bottle of wine. Mom chose one of the pricier pasta dishes. Jake, ever oblivious, selected a nearly $30 steak. I, ever practical, chose a simple chicken parmesan, already mentally calculating how much this celebration would cost me, because despite Dad's grand announcement, I knew with a sinking certainty who would ultimately be paying the bill. Throughout the appetizers, the conversation remained light, superficial. Mom asked about my fellow graduates, feigning interest. Dad inquired about the speakers, making polite, detached comments. Jake complained about having to sit in the sun. No one, not a single one of them, asked about my job plans or what came next. It was as if my graduation marked the definitive end of something, rather than the exhilarating beginning of a new chapter. As our main courses arrived, Dad cleared his throat, the clinking of his fork against his plate echoing in the sudden quiet, and raised his wine glass. "A toast to our graduate, Sophia," he announced, his voice booming slightly. "We can't tell you how proud we are of what you've accomplished." I smiled, raising my own glass, allowing myself a fleeting moment of genuine connection, of shared joy. "You've always been responsible," Dad continued, his tone shifting subtly, a discordant note entering the melody. "Always thinking of the family first. That's a rare quality these days, when so many young people only think of themselves." Mom nodded, her eyes still misty, seemingly touched by his words. "But," Dad said, his voice dropping, his tone now undeniably firm, "graduation marks a transition to full adulthood. And with adulthood comes adult responsibilities." My stomach tightened, a cold knot forming in my gut. I knew with absolute certainty what was coming. "Your mother and I have discussed it," he pressed on, his gaze unwavering. "And we think it's time you started contributing more formally to the household expenses." I nearly choked on my wine. "More formally, Dad?" I managed to rasp, my voice laced with disbelief. "I've been paying bills since I was 16. He waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. Yes, you've helped out here and there, but now that you'll have a real job, it's time for a more structured arrangement." "Here and there," I repeated, incredulous, the anger beginning to simmer beneath my carefully constructed composure. "I paid the entire electric bill last month, and the internet, and half the mortgage." "That's all in the past," Dad said firmly, his eyes hard. "We're talking about the future. You're old enough now. Pay rent or get out." The ambient restaurant noise, the murmur of conversations, the clinking glasses, all seemed to fade away, replaced by a deafening silence in my own ears as I stared at my father. His expression was utterly matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather rather than delivering an ultimatum that completely erased years of my selfless financial support. $800 a month is fair, we think," he continued, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Plus, continuing to help with utilities, of course. You'll be making good money now, and this will still be cheaper than getting your own place." Jake snickered, a childish, unthinking sound that grated on my nerves. "Welcome to adult life, sis." I looked at my mother, desperately hoping for some recognition of the sheer absurdity of this demand, some flicker of empathy. But she was studiously examining her pasta, her gaze fixed, refusing to meet mine. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the molten anger building inside me. "After supporting this family financially through high school and college, working multiple jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, you now want me to pay you $800 a month in rent, plus utilities." "Don't be dramatic, Sophia," Dad replied, a dismissive tone in his voice. "We've supported you your entire life, put a roof over your head, food on the table. Now it's time for you to do your part." I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every single dollar, every single hour I'd contributed over the past 7 years. I wanted to throw the expensive wine, which I knew I'd be paying for, in his face and walk out of that restaurant forever. Instead, I took a deep, shuddering breath and said, with as much calm as I could muster, "I'll think about it." That seemed to satisfy him. The conversation smoothly shifted to Jake's summer plans, which apparently involved a road trip with friends that my parents were, ironically, helping to fund. I sat in silence, pushing my chicken around the plate, my appetite long gone, replaced by a bitter taste in my mouth. When the bill came, the waiter placed it, as expected, in front of my father. Dad looked at it for a moment, then, with a conspiratorial wink, slid it across the table to me. "Consider this your first adult expense," he said, indicating the $178 total. I placed my credit card on the bill, without comment, ignoring Jake's smug smirk and my mother's uncomfortable, fleeting glance away. The drive home was cloaked in a heavy, oppressive silence. I stared out the window, the passing streetlights blurring into streaks of light, my mind mentally calculating how much money I had given my family over the years, and, more importantly, how much I had left in my secret account, the one they knew nothing about. By the time we pulled into the familiar driveway, my decision was made, firm and resolute. Tomorrow would be the beginning of my new life, whether they were ready for it or not. Sleep completely eluded me that night. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that had been there since I was 10, a nostalgic relic of a simpler time. The dinner conversation replayed in my mind on an endless, torturous loop. The casual dismissal of my years of contribution, the entitled arrogance of my father's voice, the complicit silence from my mother, the smug, unthinking look on Jake's face. 6 months earlier, I had sat across from Harriet in her small, reassuring office, nervously twisting a tissue in my hands. "I need to make a change," I had told her, my voice barely a whisper. "But I'm afraid of what it will do to my family." Harriet had looked at me with deep compassion, but also with an unwavering firmness. "Sophia," she had said, her voice clear and steady, "we have reviewed your finances together for over a year now. Do you know what I see?" I shook my head, tears pricking my eyes. "I see someone who has contributed over $30,000 to her family's expenses while simultaneously taking on student debt and working herself to exhaustion. I see parents who have come to expect this support as their due, and I see a pattern that will continue indefinitely unless you break it." She pulled out a folder containing the meticulous documentation we had compiled together. Bank statements showing transfers to my parents, receipts for bills paid, a detailed spreadsheet tracking every single contribution. "Your starting salary at Meridian Marketing will be $60,000 annually," she continued, her voice matter of fact. "If you continue supporting your family at current levels, you will effectively give them approximately $24,000 each year. That is 40% of your income." When she put it that way, the situation seemed even more absurd, more painfully clear. "You have saved diligently despite these demands," Harriet continued, a note of admiration in her voice. "You have $15,000 in your separate account. That is enough for a down payment on a modest home in several of the neighborhoods we have discussed." That day, we had mapped out a precise plan. I would continue my contributions until graduation to avoid any premature conflict. Meanwhile, I would work with a trusted realtor to find a suitable property, close the deal before graduation, and move immediately after the ceremony. Bernard, the realtor Harriet had recommended, had been instrumental in finding my little house on Maple Street. He understood my tight budget constraints and my even tighter timeline. We looked at dozens of properties before finding the right one. A charming 1950s bungalow with good bones, but outdated decor. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a surprisingly spacious living room with a cozy fireplace. "The owners are motivated sellers," Bernard had explained, his voice confident. "They've already moved to Arizona and just want to close quickly." The asking price was $175,000. With my excellent credit score and hard-earned savings, plus a first-time home buyer program that Bernard skillfully navigated, I secured a mortgage with monthly payments less than what my father was demanding in rent. The closing had been nerve-wracking. I had taken a day off from classes, telling my parents I had an important exam. Instead, I had sat at a table with strangers, signing document after document until my hand cramped, each signature a declaration of independence. When the final paper was signed, Bernard had handed me the keys with a broad smile. "Congratulations, homeowner." Now, lying in my childhood bedroom for what I knew would be the very last time, I felt a strange, bittersweet mix of sadness and resolute determination. This house, these four walls, held countless memories, not all of them bad, but it also represented a family dynamic that had, over the years, become increasingly toxic, stifling my very essence. At 6 a.m., I rose quietly, the first hints of dawn filtering through the window, and began the methodical process of packing. I was surprised by how little I actually owned, despite having lived there for most of my life. My clothes fit neatly into 2 suitcases. My beloved books and cherished personal items filled 3 modest boxes. My jewelry, mostly inexpensive pieces I'd bought myself, fit into a small pouch. By 7:30, everything was stacked neatly by my bedroom door, awaiting transport. I could hear movement in the kitchen below, my mother's familiar footsteps, the comforting gurgle of the coffee maker. Taking a deep, fortifying breath, I carried the first suitcase downstairs. Mom looked up from the kitchen table, genuine surprise crossing her face. "You're up early. Want some coffee?" "No, thanks, Mom," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my heart. "I'm moving out today." Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips, suspended in disbelief. "What?" "Because of what your father said." "Honey, he didn't mean you have to leave immediately." "I know," I replied, setting the suitcase by the front door a decisive thud. "But I've been planning this for a while. It's time." She followed me as I went back upstairs for the second suitcase, her brow furrowed with confusion. "But where will you go? Do you have an apartment lined up? You can't just leave without a plan." I smiled despite myself, a small, wry curve of my lips. She genuinely had no idea, no comprehension, that I was capable of making such significant plans without their knowledge or input, without their permission. "I have a place," I said simply, adding the second suitcase to the first. By now, the commotion had awakened my father. He appeared in the hallway, hair disheveled, his robe hastily tied, his face a mixture of sleepiness and irritation. "What is going on?" he demanded, his voice gruff. "Sophia says she's moving out," Mom explained, wringing her hands, her voice tight with worry. Dad looked at the suitcases, then at me, his expression shifting from confusion to a rising anger. "Because of last night? For God's sake, we were just having a conversation about adult responsibilities. There's no need for dramatics." "This isn't about last night," I said, returning upstairs for my boxes, my voice firm, each word a hammer blow to their carefully constructed reality. "This has been my plan for months. I'm starting my new job on Monday, and I need to be settled in my new place before then." "New place?" Dad followed me up the stairs, his voice rising in disbelief. "What new place? You can't afford a place of your own yet. You need to build up savings first." The irony of him lecturing me about savings after he had systematically drained mine for years was almost laughable, a bitter, hollow sound in my mind. "My new place is all taken care of," I said, lifting a heavy box of books, refusing to engage with his hypocrisy. "I've been saving and planning for this." "Saving?" Dad's voice rose, a dangerous edge creeping into it. "How could you be saving when you've been helping us with expenses?" I didn't answer, focusing instead on carrying my belongings downstairs, each step a further step toward liberation. Mom was now sitting on the bottom step, looking utterly lost, her face pale. Jake had emerged from his room, watching the scene unfold with an unusual, uncharacteristic attentiveness. "The moving company will be here at 9 o'clock, I announced, checking my watch, my voice calm and businesslike. "I just need to get everything downstairs before they arrive." "Moving company." Mom's voice was faint, a fragile whisper. Sophia, this is all so sudden. It wasn't sudden to me. It was the culmination of years of growing awareness, of emotional awakening, and months of careful, painstaking planning. But I understood that to them, sheltered in their world of expectation, it seemed to come entirely out of nowhere. They had never once considered that I might have a life separate from their constant, demanding needs. You'll still help with the bills, right? Dad asked, his anger momentarily giving way to a sudden, desperate concern, his priorities laid bare. Even if you're not living here. And there it was. Not worry about my well-being, not sadness at my departure, but an immediate, urgent concern about how my decision would irrevocably affect their finances. No, I said, the single word feeling like both a profound betrayal of my past and an exhilarating liberation of my future. I will not be paying your bills anymore. The silence that followed was profound, absolute, heavy with unsaid words and shattered expectations. My father's face flushed a deep, angry red. My mother's eyes filled with sudden tears, her facade finally cracking. Jake looked from them to me, his young face slowly shifting as he finally seemed to understand the complex, toxic dynamics at play. You can't just abandon your family. Dad sputtered eventually, his voice thick with outrage. I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied, my voice steady, unwavering. I'm simply starting my own life. You always said that was what you wanted for me. The moving truck arrived precisely at 9 o'clock, a large, reassuring presence in front of our house. Two men, efficient and professional, quickly began loading my meager belongings. I did a final sweep of my room, checking drawers and closets for anything forgotten, a final farewell to my childhood space. As I turned to leave, I noticed my mother standing in the doorway, looking small or somehow diminished. I didn't realize how little you have, she said softly, her voice barely audible. After all these years, it was the closest she had ever come to acknowledging the profound imbalance that had defined our relationship, the invisible burdens I had carried. I hugged her briefly, a quick, almost formal embrace, then headed downstairs where my father was, predictably, arguing with the movers about their parking position. Dad, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his bluster. I'm leaving now. I'll call you in a few days when I'm settled. He turned to me, his expression a complex, bewildering mix of anger, disbelief, and a dawning fear. This is how you repay us for everything we've done for you? By running away the moment we ask you to contribute. The sheer unfairness of his statement struck me like a physical blow, a sharp, bitter pain. But instead of arguing, instead of engaging in the same old futile battle, I simply handed him a plain white envelope. What is this? He asked, his voice suspicious. A copy of my new address in case of emergency, I replied, my voice calm, controlled. And a record of the financial contributions I have made to this household over the past 7 years. I thought you might want to review it before we talk again. Then I walked out the door, climbed into my car, and followed the moving truck to my new home, to my new beginning. The moving truck pulled up in front of my house at 9:00 for that morning. My house. The phrase still felt strange, exhilarating in my mind. The modest bungalow, with its faded blue paint and crisp white trim, looked exactly as I remembered from my previous, secret visits. But now it was truly mine. I parked behind the truck and sat for a moment, taking in the sight, allowing the reality to sink in. The small front yard definitely needed attention. The grass was overgrown. A few tenacious weeds pushed through cracks in the concrete path. The porch had a slight, charming sag on one side. The gutters could use a good cleaning. But the bones were good, solid, and it was mine. Every imperfection, every small flaw, represented not a burden, but a piece of my hard-won freedom. The movers, Tim and Carlos, efficiently unloaded my few possessions. When all the boxes and suitcases were neatly stacked in the center of the living room, Tim handed me the clipboard to sign. That's it, he asked, looking around the nearly empty space, a hint of surprise in his voice. Nothing else coming? No, I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. Just starting out. Carlos nodded approvingly, a kind smile on his face. Best way to do it. No clutter, fresh beginning. After they left, the house fell into a profound silence. I stood in the center of my empty living room, overwhelmed by the quiet and the sheer expanse of space that was now mine alone. I had furniture being delivered later that day, the bare essentials I'd ordered online. A bed, a comfortable couch, a small dining table with 2 chairs. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The rest of the morning was spent in a flurry of activity, unpacking my clothes and personal items, carefully placing them in drawers and closets. I'd bought cleaning supplies earlier in the week, so I meticulously wiped down counters and swept floors. The house had been professionally cleaned before closing, but it had sat empty for several weeks, and a fine layer of dust had accumulated. Around noon, a gentle knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find an older woman with striking silver hair and bright, inquisitive eyes standing on my porch. "Hello there," she said warmly, her voice friendly. "I'm Doris Abernathy from next door. I saw the moving truck earlier and wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." She held out a ceramic dish, covered with foil, emitting a delicious aroma. "Just a simple casserole. Moving day is exhausting, and everyone needs to eat." I accepted the dish with genuine gratitude, a wave of warmth washing over me. "Thank you so much. I'm Sophia Wilson. I just graduated college, and this is my first house." Doris beamed, her smile widening. "How wonderful! A young homeowner. That's not something you see every day anymore." We chatted for a few minutes, Doris kindly filling me in on the neighborhood. The charming couple across the street who'd lived there for 30 years. The young family 2 doors down with energetic twins. The best day for trash collection, and which local grocery store had the freshest produce. "If you need anything at all, you just come knock," she said as she prepared to leave, her eyes twinkling. "Oh, and the previous owners left some perennial bulbs in the garden. They'll come up next spring. Beautiful tulips and daffodils." After Doris left, I felt a little less alone, a little more rooted. The idea that flowers planted by previous owners would bloom in my garden next year gave me a strange sense of continuity, a quiet connection to the history of this place that was now unequivocally mine. The furniture delivery arrived promptly at 3 p.m. 2 men efficiently assembled my bed frame and carefully positioned the couch and dining table. By 5 o'clock, I had the semblance of a home. The bed was made with fresh, new sheets, a small luxury. The couch faced the cozy fireplace, inviting quiet contemplation. The dining table sat in the sunny corner of the kitchen, ready for future meals. That first night alone in my house was a complex mix of terrifying and exhilarating. Every creak and rustle of the old building made me jump, my senses on high alert. The shadows seemed different, unfamiliar, compared to those in my childhood home. The street noises were new, a symphony of strange sounds. But underlying the nervousness, overriding the apprehension, was a profound, exhilarating sense of accomplishment. I had done this. I had created this opportunity for myself. Despite years of financial drainage and subtle, insidious emotional manipulation. I slept fitfully that first night, waking several times, my mind still racing. By morning, though, I felt more settled, a deeper sense of peace finally taking root. I made coffee in the new coffee maker I'd treated myself to, a small symbol of my newfound freedom, and sat at my little table, planning my day. Monday would be my first day at Meridian Marketing, but I had the entire weekend to continue organizing, to truly make this house my home. Sunday evening, my phone began buzzing with an insistent urgency. I had deliberately kept my phone off for most of the weekend, needing space, needing silence, to process the enormous, seismic shift in my life. Now, the outside world was intruding, demanding my attention. "Mom, hope you are settled in." Please let us know you're okay. Dad, the internet bill is due Tuesday. Will you be sending money? Jake, Dad is freaking out about bills. What did you do? I responded only to my mother, a brief text assuring her I was fine and settled. To the others, I maintained a resolute, difficult silence. It was harder than I expected. Years of conditioning had taught me to respond immediately to financial requests, to prioritize their needs above my own comfort or plans. Breaking that ingrained pattern, severing those invisible threads, felt almost physically painful, a profound ache in my chest. Monday came, and with it, my first day as a marketing coordinator at Meridian. The day passed in a blur of new faces, orientation sessions, and endless paperwork. By the time I returned to my little blue house, I was utterly exhausted but exhilarated, a potent mix of emotions. This was the beginning of my career, my independent life, my chosen path. Tuesday brought more texts from my father, each one increasingly urgent, more desperate. Dad, the electricity bill is past due. They are threatening to shut off. Dad, did you get my message about the internet bill? It is important for Jake's schoolwork. Dad, Sophia, you cannot just ignore your family responsibilities. Wednesday, my mother called during my lunch break, her voice tight with worry, laced with an underlying plea. Honey, she began, her tone gentle, I know you're establishing your independence, and I respect that, but your father is very stressed about the bills. Could you just help us out one more time while we figure things out? Mom, I said gently, my voice firm despite the tremor I felt inside. I've been helping out one more time for 7 years. Dad needs to figure out how to manage the household budget without my income. But the electricity might be shut off tomorrow, she said, her voice trembling, dissolving into a fragile whisper, and the internet already has been. Jake has a paper due. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming, a familiar, insidious claw tearing at me. I almost caved right then, almost offered to pay the bill, just this once. But Harriet's voice echoed in my mind, a powerful, unwavering mantra. This pattern will continue as long as you allow it. I'm sorry, Mom, I said, my voice stronger than I thought possible. I cannot help anymore. Dad has a job. You have a job. The two of you need to figure this out. Thursday evening, the doorbell rang, a startling sound in my quiet home. I opened it to find my entire family standing on my porch, a somber, uninvited delegation. Dad looked angry, his face a thundercloud. Mom looked anxious, her hands clasped tightly. Jake looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. This is where you live now? Dad asked without preamble, looking past me, his gaze sweeping over the interior of my small house. You bought a house? Yes, I replied, blocking the doorway, my stance protective. Would you like to come in? They filed past me into the small living room, the space feeling suddenly crowded, tense. Dad immediately began examining everything, his eyes darting around, checking the fireplace, looking at the ceiling, even opening doors to inspect other rooms, a restless, invasive energy emanating from him. Mom sat cautiously on the very edge of the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap like a fragile bird. Jake, ever curious, wandered into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator without asking, a casual disregard for boundaries that still pricked me. How did you afford this? Dad demanded, his voice sharp, accusatory. Where did the money come from? I saved, I said simply, calmly, and I qualified for a first-time home buyer program. Saved from what? His voice rose, tinged with disbelief and suspicion. You gave us every spare penny. Not every penny, I corrected, my voice even unwavering. I set aside a portion of my earnings for my future. I have been doing it for years. So you lied to us, he accused, his voice thick with a sense of betrayal. All those times you said you were broke, that you couldn't help more with the bills. You were hiding money. Several of my new neighbors were out in their yards, pretending not to watch the escalating confrontation, their concerned gazes flickering to us occasionally. Doris, next door, had come out to water her flowers, her expression a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. "I never lied," I said firmly, my voice cutting through his accusation. "I contributed thousands of dollars to your household. I worked multiple jobs through high school and college to help support the family, but I also protected myself because no one else was going to." "We are your parents," Mom interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "We have always protected you. Have you?" I asked, looking directly at her, meeting her gaze for the first time. "Or have you protected Dad and his poor financial choices at my expense?" Her gaze dropped immediately to her hands, a silent admission of guilt. "The electric company shut off the power this afternoon," Dad said, his anger giving way to a raw desperation. "The house is dark. The food in the refrigerator will spoil. Is that what you want?" "Of course not," I replied, my voice softening slightly. "But I want you to understand that it is not my responsibility to fix this. It never should have been." Jake had returned from his inspection of my kitchen, his face now a mask of confusion. "So what? You're just going to let us suffer because you're mad about paying rent? That's cold, Jake." "This is not about rent, Jake," I said, my own frustration finally building, a controlled fire in my belly. "This is about 7 years of supporting this family while being treated like a personal ATM. This is about Dad's gambling and Mom's enabling, and you never having to contribute a dime while I worked myself to exhaustion." The word gambling hung heavy in the air, a shocking, undeniable truth. Jake looked at Dad in confusion, his brow furrowed. Mom's eyes filled with tears again, her face crumpling. "You don't know what you're talking about." Dad blustered, but the fight, the conviction, was slowly leaving his voice, replaced by a desperate, hollow defensiveness. "I think I do," I replied, my voice steady, resolute. "And I think it is time we all acknowledge the reality of our family dynamic." "How dare you accuse me of gambling?" my father said, his voice dangerously low, a final attempt at intimidation. "After everything we have done for you, Dad, please," I replied, trying to keep my tone even, devoid of accusation. "Let us be honest with each other for once. I know about the casino visits. I know about the online poker accounts. I know about the loans." His face paled slightly, a ghost of his former bluster, but he maintained his defensive posture. "Everyone needs recreation. A few games here, and they're not gambling." Mom was staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, her shoulders slumped in defeat. Jake looked utterly confused, his eyes moving frantically from Dad to me and back again, piecing together a horrifying puzzle. "What is she talking about?" he asked Mom, his voice small, disbelieving. "Dad doesn't gamble." The silence that followed was answer enough. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to a dawning, heartbreaking disbelief. "Is that true?" he pressed, his voice rising, a tremor of anger creeping in. "Is that why we're always broke, even though you and Mom both work and Sophia has been paying bills?" "We wanted to protect you," Mom said, finally looking up, her eyes pleading. "We didn't want you to worry about adult problems. So, instead, you let Sophia carry everything." Jake's voice rose, edged with a fierce protectiveness I'd never heard from him. "She is only 3 years older than me. She was still a kid, too." His unexpected defense of me was both startling and deeply touching. For years, I had harbored a silent resentment toward his carefree existence while I struggled under the weight of their needs. Now I realized he had been as much in the dark, as much a victim of their secrecy as I had been. "The point is," Dad said, trying one last time to regain some semblance of control, "we are in crisis now. The electricity is off. We need help." I closed the laptop, a decisive click, and faced my family, my stance resolute. "I am willing to help, but not by giving you money. That approach has not worked for 7 years, and it will not work now. What does that mean? Dad asked suspiciously, his eyes narrowing. It means I will help you develop a realistic budget based on your actual income. It means Dad needs to get help for his gambling addiction. It means Mom needs to stop enabling destructive behaviors. And it means Jake might need to get a part-time job to contribute, just like I did at his age. Gambling addiction is a strong term, Dad mumbled, a pathetic, weak protest. Is it? I asked, my gaze unwavering. How much have you lost in the past year alone? How many times have you promised to stop? How many bills have gone unpaid because the money went to gambling instead? He had no answer. I own this house outright, I said, the statement causing all three of them to stare at me in stunned shock. No mortgage. I saved enough for a substantial down payment, and the first-time home buyer program covered the rest based on my income and credit score. That is impossible, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction, the lie crumbling around him. Not impossible when you have been saving since you were 16 and recently received a signing bonus from your new employer, I replied, my voice sharp, clear. Not impossible when you have been learning about financial planning instead of looking for the next quick win. The undeniable reality of my independence was finally sinking in, hitting them with the force of a tidal wave. My father's face had gone from an angry red to a shocking pale, the full, devastating implications becoming horrifyingly clear. I would not be returning to rescue them. I would not be sending money. The ATM they had relied on for years, the convenient, endless source of funds, was permanently closed. So that is it? Dad asked, a raw note of desperation finally creeping into his voice. You're just cutting us off completely? I am giving you a choice, I clarified, my voice unwavering, offering them a path, a lifeline. Option 1, I help you create a realistic financial plan. Dad seeks treatment for his gambling addiction. Mom takes a more active, accountable role in household finances, and Jake contributes through part-time work. We rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. And option 2? Mom asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Option 2 is that you continue as you have been, but without my financial support. You figure it out on your own. That is not much of a choice, Dad muttered, his shoulders slumped. More choice than I had at 16, I replied evenly, the quiet power of my truth filling the room. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken emotions, years of resentment, manipulation, and misplaced responsibilities hanging thick and suffocating between us. Finally, Jake spoke up, his voice unexpectedly firm. I want option 1, and I already applied for a job at the grocery store where Sophia used to work. Mom looked at him in surprise, then at me, a flicker of hope in her tear-filled eyes. I want option 1 too, she said, her voice filled with regret. I should have been stronger years ago. I am so sorry, Sophia. All eyes turned to Dad. He stood rigid, unmoving, his pride warring fiercely with undeniable necessity on his face. You really own this house? He asked again, a desperate need for confirmation. I nodded. And we might lose ours if things do not change, he acknowledged reluctantly, the words a bitter admission. The second mortgage you took out last year without telling Mom is catching up to you, I said, revealing that I knew even more than they thought, stripping away his final layers of deceit. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Second mortgage, Robert? You said that was a small personal loan. Dad's shoulders slumped, the facade finally crumbling completely, irrevocably. I will try option 1, he said, his voice barely audible, defeated. But I don't have a problem. I can stop any time. That is the first thing we will need to address, I said firmly, my gaze direct. You cannot solve a problem you will not acknowledge. As they prepared to leave, the crushing reality of their situation visibly weighed on them. No electricity at home, mounting bills, long-held secrets exposed. The dynamic had shifted irreversibly, irrevocably. "We will talk tomorrow about next steps," I said as they stood on my porch, their figures silhouetted against the dimming evening light. "For tonight, you can stay at the Comfort Inn on 4th Street. I will call and pay for one night while you figure things out." It was the only financial assistance I was willing to offer, a temporary buffer to ease the difficult transition, rather than a return to the old, destructive patterns. As their car pulled away, its taillights receding into the darkness, I felt a complex mix of emotions: guilt for their predicament, a lingering anger at years of exploitation, and a fragile, nascent hope that real, lasting change might actually be possible. But most of all, I felt an overwhelming, exhilarating sense of liberation. The truth was finally out in the open, raw and exposed, and with it came the genuine, terrifying possibility of healing. 3 months after that tumultuous confrontation on my porch, life had changed dramatically for all of us. My little blue house had truly become mine, imbued with personal touches that made it feel like a warm, inviting home. I had painted the living room a soothing cream color, hung vibrant curtains, and, with invaluable advice from Doris, planted a riot of colorful flowers in the front yard. Each change, no matter how small, represented my independence and a steadily growing sense of self. At work, I was thriving. My position at Meridian Marketing challenged me in ways school never had, stretching my mind and honing my skills, and my supervisors had already recognized my tireless work ethic and natural organizational skills. A small promotion came after just 2 months, along with the responsibility of managing our social media accounts, a testament to their faith in me. The stability of a regular paycheck that was entirely mine felt like an unimaginable luxury after years of immediately dividing my earnings among various, incessant family needs. The relationship with my family had evolved into something I couldn't have possibly imagined on that tense, fractured graduation night. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks, moments of regression, but progress was undeniable, a slow, arduous climb. Dad had initially resisted attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, stubbornly insisting he could control his habit without external help. It took the mortgage company sending a formal notice of foreclosure proceedings to finally break through his denial, shattering his carefully constructed illusion of control. The night he received that devastating letter, he called me in tears, something I had never, ever witnessed before. "I don't want to lose our home," he had said, his voice raw, breaking with an unfamiliar vulnerability. "I don't want to lose my family. Please help me." The very next day, I drove him to his first GA meeting. He had gone 3 times a week since then, a testament to his newfound commitment. The process was incredibly difficult for him, requiring an honesty and vulnerability that didn't come naturally after years of deception and secrecy. But seeing him work through the 12-step program, acknowledging the profound harm his addiction had caused, gave me a powerful, sustaining hope that real, lasting change was truly possible. He even landed a new position at Anderson Technology, not management, but a solid salary with genuine room for growth. Mom, meanwhile, had found full-time work as an office manager at a local dental practice, effectively doubling her previous income from the library. The job seemed to give her not just financial security, but a newfound confidence, a quiet strength I hadn't seen in her before. She had also started attending support groups for families of gambling addicts, learning how her well-intentioned but ultimately destructive enabling behavior had contributed to the problem, unknowingly feeding the beast. "I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping the peace," she told me over coffee one Sunday afternoon, her voice filled with regret. "But I was just making it possible for the situation to continue. I failed you, Sophia. I let you carry burdens that were never yours to bear." Her heartfelt acknowledgement of my experience, her validation of my pain, was healing in ways I had not expected, a balm to old wounds. For years, I had felt invisible in my own family, valued only for what I could provide financially. Having my mother truly see me, truly understand, was an invaluable gift. Jake had surprised everyone with his compassionate and mature response to the family crisis. He quickly secured a part-time job at the grocery store, just as I had done, and diligently contributed his earnings to the household expenses. More importantly, he had stepped up emotionally, often mediating between our parents when tensions inevitably rose during difficult financial discussions, a surprising new role for him. "I never realized how much you did for us," he had told me one evening when he visited my house, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "I was so caught up in my own life that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. I'm sorry for being such a self-centered jerk." His apology, so sincere, meant more than he could ever know. The resentment I had carried toward him for years began to dissolve, replaced by a genuine fondness for the responsible, empathetic young man he was becoming. As for me, the most significant change was profoundly internal. The constant, gnawing anxiety about money that had been my unwelcome companion since adolescence was gradually subsiding, releasing its grip on my soul. I was slowly learning to spend on myself without guilt, to save for my future without fear, and, crucially, to establish boundaries without apology. Part of that growth included dating for the first time in years. Between the relentless demands of work and family obligations, romantic relationships had seemed an impossible luxury during college. Now, I was seeing Vincent, a talented graphic designer I'd met through work. Our relationship was still new, tentative, but his profound respect for my independence and his empathetic understanding of my complex family history made him easy, comforting to be with. My friendship with Elaine had deepened as well. She had been right all along about my family dynamic, and her unwavering support, her steadfast belief in me, had been absolutely crucial during the difficult transition. We met weekly for dinner, alternating between her apartment and my house, sharing stories and advice as we navigated the exhilarating, sometimes bewildering, journey of early adulthood together. The family financial situation had stabilized somewhat. With Dad's gambling finally under control, Mom's new, better-paying job, and Jake's earnest contribution, they had managed to negotiate with the mortgage company and, thankfully, keep the house. They were on a strict budget that I had helped create, a framework for their financial recovery, but did not fund. Sometimes they slipped up, human nature being what it is, and occasionally, Dad would subtly hint about needing help with an unexpected expense, a shadow of old habits. But I maintained my boundaries with gentle, yet unyielding, firmness. "I can help you figure out how to handle that within your budget," I would offer instead of money, or we can look at what expenses might be reduced this month to cover it. It wasn't always easy. Years of conditioning had trained me to rescue them at any cost to myself, to be their immediate solution. Sometimes the guilt was overwhelming, especially when Mom mentioned having to cancel small luxuries or when Jake talked about delaying his college plans to work more hours. But I reminded myself again and again that true help meant supporting their independence, fostering self-sufficiency, not perpetuating their dependence. One Sunday evening, almost exactly 3 months after that pivotal confrontation, my family came to my house for dinner. It was our new tradition, a weekly meal together that symbolized our changing, healing relationship. I had prepared a simple but delicious meal, and we sat around my small dining table, the conversation flowing more easily, more genuinely than it had in years. "I have some news," Dad announced as we finished dessert, a nervous excitement in his voice. "I have been offered a position at Anderson Technology. It's not management level like my old job, but the salary is significantly better than what I'm making now, and there is definite room for advancement." "That's wonderful," Mom exclaimed, genuine pride shining in her voice, a beautiful sound. "Congratulations, Dad," I added, reaching over to squeeze his hand, a gesture of true affection. "You deserve this opportunity." He squeezed back, his eyes suspiciously bright, a hint of tears. "I couldn't have done it without all of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Especially you, Sophia. Your tough love saved this family, even when we fought against it. His heartfelt acknowledgment brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had wanted nothing more than for my parents to truly see me, to value me for more than my financial contribution. This simple, honest recognition felt like the closing of one painful chapter and the hopeful, radiant beginning of another. As they prepared to leave that evening, Mom hugged me tightly, a deep, loving embrace. "I am so proud of the woman you have become," she whispered, her voice soft with emotion. "You taught us all what real strength looks like." Standing on my porch, watching their car drive away, their figures receding into the quiet night, I felt a profound sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The journey had been painful, the confrontations difficult, and the changes challenging, almost unbearable at times. But through it all, I had discovered my own intrinsic worth, a value that existed far beyond what I could provide for others. I had learned that true family supports each other's growth, nurtures each other's strengths, rather than exploiting each other's weaknesses. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the most loving, most compassionate thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them, to release them from your endless provision, and instead stand beside them, offering unwavering support as they learn, painstakingly, to rescue themselves. Life wasn't perfect. My family still struggled at times, and I still battled old, ingrained habits of over-responsibility, the desire to fix everything. But we were all growing, healing, and building something healthier, something more authentic together. And that, I realized, was worth every difficult conversation, every painful boundary, and every brave, terrifying step toward change.